You would think I'm saying, oh, I don't want this to happen. I want it to happen, okay? We need a recession. The economy is a play of opposites. If you don't understand that, you shouldn't even aspire to be an economist. I took economics and quit because they didn't understand this. China's going to go down more than any country in history in the next several years. And people are going to say, I thought they were it.
Hello and welcome back to Soar Financially, a channel where we discuss the macro to understand the micro. My name is Kai Hoffman, I'm the JR mining guy over on X, and of course your host of this channel, and I'm looking forward to bringing back Harry Dent. We've had him on at the end of September, and of course a lot has changed. He made a couple market crash calls. We talked about bond yields, bond as a safe haven investment, and I remember he was hating on gold, meaning he doesn't see it as a safe haven investment. So I have to catch up with him whether anything has changed now that gold almost hit 3,000. Whether gold has been fulfilling, of course, its purpose, and why it has been moving like that. So we'll get a good holistic overview of the economy, what is driving markets right now, and what does he expect will happen next. Of course, before I switch over to my guest, hit that like and subscribe button because about 80% of you are not subscribed to the channel. Let's please change that. It helps us out tremendously, and we do appreciate it. Now, Harry, it is great to welcome you back on the program. It's good to see you. How you been?
Good. I mean, I'm in Puerto Rico where the taxes are about 4% and the weather's a lot better than Florida. People think, well, you're farther south, it's got to be hotter. No, it's less hot.
Less humid too?
A little less humid and a little less hot.
Nice. So, but temperature is heating up in the markets. If we look at it, maybe we'll start there. Harry, like maybe just as a can opener for the conversation, but what is your current assessment of the financial markets and the economy?
Okay, we had the biggest natural bubble in history in the late 90s, similar to the Roaring 20s. Those were what I call natural bubbles. The economy's so good between growing demographics and technological progress that, things are good and then stocks get overvalued. Okay. Well, it's different this time. I mean, what happened after the 2008 crash, which Kai, I predicted in the early to mid 80s that the US would predict in this long baby boom driven boom in late 2007 and start to go down for 12 to 15 years after that, way back then. Well, the difference here is this time when it did crash in 2008 and started to go down well into 2009, government stepped up and said, well, wait a minute, we've got new tools that we never knew we had before or never used. It's called printing money. We'll just run endless deficits and we'll print endless money. And it wasn't the Federal Reserve chairman that started this. Mario Draghi in Europe said back when things started going down in 2008, he said, if any investors want to short this market, I will blow you out of the water. I will print so much money, you'll wish you'd never even thought about it. That's the beginning of what we're in now, okay? So we've had this long downturn, what should have been from 2008 to 22. I, again, predicted this all the way back to the early to mid 80s. Baby boom generation peaked in their spending, biggest generation in history. They do it on a 46-year lag to the birth index, average peak spending in the United States, totally documentable, okay? And we went into this, but they have, between fiscal stimulus of 8 to 9 trillion fiscal stimulus of 16 trillion and 8 trillion plus in monetary, they've just blown us out of this. They just printed enough money and ran enough deficits to make up for the decline of the 70% private sector. So that's what's happened here. And here we are still where markets have gone up because of that. And yet, where do we go from here? How do you stimulate more than that? And things are weakening again here. So I think we have put off what I call a Great Depression between 2008 to 22. We just put it off, so it's going to have to hit the second wave after 2008 to 9 into the next few years. Now, we'll have to see how markets react, but I'm telling you, this is not sustainable. You can't just print money out of thin air, and you cannot run endless deficits without compromising your own credit quality. I mean, people don't realize the U.S. government is the best borrower in the world. We have the lowest rates for borrowing of any entity in the world, which has allowed us to run unprecedented deficits. But you can't run unprecedented deficits without eventually getting into trouble. And I think that's why we're in trouble now. We had this big crash in 2007, 8, 9. It should have gone much lower, but they printed $27 trillion in combined stimulus to offset it. And now we're still, okay, well, we've gotten about back to where we were, and we're still struggling. What happens next? I think this second greatest, longest bubble in history. And I'm just telling you, folks, if you go back and look at stocks long term, if you think the roaring 20s was a big bubble or the mid to late 90s was a big bubble, look at this one since early 2009. Biggest, longest, fattest, badass bubble in history. And there's only one thing bubble do in history. And if this bubble doesn't burst, folks, I will quit my career and never be heard from again, okay? I'll just give you that straight up front. This bubble has to burst. And when it does, it's not going to be, there is no way to burst this bubble with a soft landing because it is so extreme in the first place. We covered over what would have been the next 1930s decade-long depression. We've covered it over by simply printing money and running deficits. Both of these are printing money, by the way. You're just creating excess spending out of nothing. The difference is the government has to pay for it long term, and the money supply growing up just can contract, but it doesn't matter. This cannot end well, and that's what I'm saying. And if it does end well in the next 2 to 3 years, I will quit my profession forever and never be heard from again.
Yeah, I know it's absolutely like the money printing M2 money supply has been increasing. It's back.
It was that easy. Why didn't we invent this 100 years ago? You just print money and the economy grows. Why do we work? Why do companies invest and take risks when you could just print money and everything's okay? This is the greatest. This is the greatest financial crime in all of history times 10. That's how I put it.
Yeah, because it's not effective spending. It is not effective spending.
Yeah.
You know, you print a dollar, but you only get like 10 cents.
More speculation on top of a bubble that's already encouraged too much speculation. That's what we've done here. We took the first bubble that peaked in the tech markets in 2000 and the overall economy in 2007. It crashed twice, and then we're creating a bigger bubble to solve the first bubble. Does that sound like sound policy? And my answer is not a chance in hell in all of eternity. That's my answer. And if it does, I'll quit. I'll 3 years from now, if this thing doesn't burst, I'll say, you know what? I'm the dumb guy. We should have always realized we can just print more money and get rich. Why did we work so hard?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's that simple, to be honest, but because you need productivity, and without, while you print money, like, there's no incentive for productivity, right?
Exactly.
So,
you know why I turned around 6 businesses, new ventures in the 1980s. That was the beginning of my career after Harvard Business School. I thought I was going to be a consultant in large companies. It was too boring for me. I did that at Bain & Company for a year. I realized that the dynamics comes from new businesses creating new things, entrepreneurialism, and then it grows in the mainstream on a predictable S-curve. So that's when I got what really drives the economy, new generations and demographics, and new innovations and technologies that move into the mainstream on an S-curve. Takes forever to get the first 10%, then it explodes into 90%. New generation comes along after the last generation peaked and turned down. Explodes the next boom with spending. The point is, These things are totally predictable and timeable. Once an S curve gets to 10%, you can predict the rest of the S curve. Once a new generation is born, you can predict what they're going to do for the rest of their lives, including dying.
Where are we on the S curve for AI right now? Like, how many percent into it are we right now? Because it seems like the US is betting big on it. It seems like it is the savior that everybody's hanging their head on. How much of a chance do you see that will actually happen? It will help drive productivity. It'll help drive like tech growth, GDP growth in general. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I'd say, in the last several years or so, it's been in its 0 to 10% penetration. It's getting ready to explode in the 10 to 90% adopted. The S curve is the most powerful thing in history, and why everything's exponential. It takes a while for something to prove itself. Think about us. Until we're kids, okay, we cost a lot of money. Do we produce much? No, we cause a lot of trouble. But once we enter the workforce at age 20 on average and go into our peak spending at 46 and our peak investing at 63, after that, we drive everything. And that's the way it is in innovations. And so AI and NVIDIA and crypto and Bitcoin, these are the next two big things, but they're still in their infancies, just breaking into the mainstream. So the demographics of the United States already peaked in 2007, late 2007 with the baby boomers, but the millennials take us back up to those levels in 2037 and then long-term plateau. So that's positive. But the main thing is that the technology cycles are what's going to drive this, and everything from biotech to AI, to crypto. And crypto, people don't understand what crypto is. It changes, it restructures the entire financial assets and money sector of our economy. And it's the biggest number I have on earth, Kai. It's $630 trillion in financial assets and money in the world, 5 times the GDP globally. And that's what crypto does. And that's why Bitcoin and the crypto technologies, the few that survive, by the way, this early stage. So we're in this infancy stage, right? Crypto's like in its 0 to 18 to 22, getting ready to burst into its 22 to 46 impact for a lifetime of a consumer on the economy. So again, the biggest point I try to make to people, because I grew up in a world that everybody, economist, I dropped my economics major in the third course because economists said nobody can predict anything past the next election. I'm like, well, why am I listening to these guys? So I found my own way to predict the economy. Generational spending and productivity cycles as we age, from 20 knowing everything to 46 actually kind of knowing everything and being productive, and new technologies that come around every 45 and especially 90 years. We're in the 90-year super bubble cycle that's seen every major bubble back to 1835, 1929. And now these things are not accidental. They come in 4-stage cycles, okay? Youth, early adulthood, late adulthood, and retirement. Everything has the same 4 stages. And that makes everything predictable if you can put a number on it. And 46 is the peak of spending for the average person in this country, in most countries, 47. And that makes the economy way more predictable than anybody thought. That's why in the early to mid 80s, when everybody thought the US was dead, I said, no, we got the biggest baby boom in the world. We're going to have the greatest boom into 2007. Everybody said, you're crazy. That was just a fact. To me, that was a fact, not even a question mark.
Well, you said like the technology boom cannot offset demographic decline. Let's call it that. Do you still stand by that? Has AI maybe caught up in terms of productivity growth or so that it could offset that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, no. If I said that's incorrect. It is a separate cycle. I used to think they were the same. Generations they innovated when they're young and they spent the most and drove mainstream. But no, you're right. The technology cycle is a 45-year cycle. The demographic cycle, the generation, is a 39-year cycle. Okay. So these two things are actually coming together. I mean, the demographic cycle is kind of peaking, but the technology cycle was still roaring into 2019 to 20. Now, since then, both of them should have been down. And because of $27 trillion, 1.5 times the average GDP in that time of stimulus, which is massive, unprecedented, hopefully will never happen again because we're going to see consequences for a long time from this aberration. But that's what's caused the technology cycle, which is just peaking in late 2019, early 2020, just recent, to be elevated. And now it's still going because when COVID hit and these cycles all went down naturally, same time, they printed more money than ever, $11 trillion out of the 27 trillion in just 2 years. So we're on 100% hot air stimulus here. And this is about to wear off now. So I'm saying, look out, everything looks fine, everything's gone back up, everything. No, this is where the stimulus, which is so huge, nobody in history would have ever predicted any government would go so crazy to do this, wears off, and they can't up it easily again because they already blew the wad. So I think the next few years is going to be difficult. And then the millennials are going to bring us out of this. They already would be now if we hadn't already created this mess. And then we'll do well into 2037 and then plateau for a long time after that. That we're seeing the peaking of North America between 2007 and 2037. And then, of course, it's all Asia after that. And eventually, long after I'm dead, Africa.
Yeah, interesting discussions, because I just read an article last week that Japanese birth rates are at all-time lows, 125-year lows. Yeah. It really plays or hints towards what you've been saying. Like demographics are off anyway. There's no real way to offset that. Like productivity growth through AI, offsetting that. Or
older people don't spend more money. They only save more money. If they think they're going to live longer, they save more to finance them living longer. The baby boom's already peaked. We'll never see a peak like this in American history again. Our next boom in 2037 will be less robust. And after that, into 2050, we'll be barely hanging in there as Asia takes over the world and North America and Europe fade.
You said like QE, obviously, and the money printing is bringing the markets to its knees. Like the Fed has been tightening its balance sheet, not enough. Like I think that's clear. Everybody knows that there's a long way to go. Then we've been introduced to Doge.
They've tightened the money policy, the monetary side, which is only a third. The 27 trillion I quoted recently, and since 2008, to overset this Great Depression, which is a lot of money, the whole economy and more. The drop on the economy. That's the difference. The monetary has pulled back. The deficit spending, the fiscal stimulus is going straight forward at full blast. That's why we're not feeling the pullback. And the quote unquote tightening only happened on 1/3 the monetary side. And nobody calculates that. I'm like, Kai, did economists just go to sleep after the 1960s and 70s? I mean, really, I hate to say it. I mean, I started off as an economics major, and after the third course, I'm like, this is useless, vague stuff. How could you learn anything from this? I was learning more from my marketing and management courses and finance courses. So I studied everything else and then came back with my own economic theory in the 1980s, looking at discovering these generational cycles, which are everything, and the technology cycles, which long-term are even more. Those two things, a 39-year generational cycle peak and a 45-year innovation technology peak, those are the two cycles that most drive our economy And I can tell you where these cycles are going to go over the rest of our lifetimes and our kids. And economists can't figure out what's going to happen in the next 2 years. It's ridiculous.
Talking about the next 2 years, do you think DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, will have any impact? Any will be disruptive?
Yeah. It'll have a great impact. It'll help trigger a recession that's now 5 years overdue. You would think I'm saying, oh, I don't want this to happen. I want it to happen. Okay. We need a recession. People don't realize how much are we awake? 16, 17 hours every day. How much do we sleep and seemingly do nothing? 6, 7, 8 hours. So is sleep a waste of time? Well, try not sleeping for 3 nights. You'll discover quickly you'll be a crazy person and totally dysfunctional. We need booms to expand the past technologies and to accommodate the new rising, say, generation demographic. But we need busts to consolidate and get rid of the waste and the bad stuff and get efficient to prepare for the next boom. You can't have one without. Recessions are the enemy of the Federal Reserve. And I'm like, it tells me, Federal Reserve Chairman, who've never had sex or run a business, or at least obviously never had sex, and definitely never run a business, have no clue what actually drives the economy. All of our great innovations come in bad times like the 30s and 40s, and the 1870s and 80s, in the Long Depression. All the innovations come when we're challenged. They don't come when we're in a boom like the Roaring 20s. How many great innovations happened in the Roaring 20s or the 1950s and 60s? Almost none is the answer. The economy is a play of opposites. If you don't understand that, you shouldn't even aspire to be an economist. I took economics and quit because they didn't understand this. I re-examined all of history, and I went back to 8,000 years ago, the beginning of modern civilization, the agricultural revolution, and recharted all types of cycles and stuff around this 4-stage innovate, growth boom, shake out the excesses, maturity boom, bring it to the masses, and then decline and bring in the new technologies to replace you. This is the cycle that drives new generations from young to peak spending to old, drive our economy. These are the two things, and economists don't even study either of them.
Talking about opposites, you brought up China into the discussion. I think we need to talk about them. The U.S. and China are the two biggest economies in the world.
Yes.
They're competing, obviously. It seems like China is ahead of the U.S. in terms of cycles, meaning to me, it feels like they've had their real estate crash. They're coming out of it now. They're in the stimulation phase. Curious what your thoughts are on China and whether there's a discrepancy in how do you see them develop?
Okay, bigger picture. China is the first large emerging country to grow into middle-class living standards. Now, their middle class there, 12,000 GDP per capita, is not even a fraction of our middle class at 60, 80,000, okay? But that was a huge thing. 1.4 billion population moving from poor to middle class in a few decades. That's why it's such a miracle. Problem is, China cheated. China basically overstimulated their economy. They just told developers to build houses and will eventually fill them. Now they have 22% empty houses with a real estate bubble that makes the US and Europe look like nothing compared to incomes, the valuations. And so China's going to have the biggest downturn ahead. And the problem is when they come out of it, they're the first emerging country to start aging rapidly because of their one-child policy. And now that they've lifted the one-child policy, guess what's happening in China? Nothing. Chinese realize, oh my God, we're better off because we only had one child. Having 2, 3, 4, we'd be bankrupt. And so that's happened. Affluency always means fewer and fewer kids. And so affluency always peaks at some point because people have less children and because they want to educate them better and make them better. It's a positive a natural motivation. But this is what causes a positive trend to change to negative. Now, my difference, Kai, and it's very simple. From the beginning, I'm a cycle guy. I was always a cycle guy. I don't know why. Cycles always peak. It doesn't matter what says, but this is going to go better. AI is going to change everything. Yeah, but at the top of the cycle, you got to shake out all the excesses from the last cycle before AI is going to have all these impact. And before the next generation comes along and drives us, we have to shake out the downturn from the last generation. So to me, cycles are everything. And that's what I decided. I never decided to major in cycles when I was in college, but I ended up majoring in long-term cycles, and I studied all modern history. William Durant, The History of Civilization, 10-volume, 10,000 pages of everything in modern history that mattered since the agricultural revolution started 8,000 years ago. That was my textbook, and no economics course has that. And nothing will beat that. I could see cycles from thousands of years down to what we still have is a decennial cycle. You watch the first 1 to 3 years of every downturn of every decade ends up down. Okay. And every other one ends up down more. And every other one after that ends up down more. These are cycles that repeat. And I finally discovered the biggest driver in modern times was the generational cycle of people growing up, entering the workforce at 20 after great expense society and earning and spending more money till 46 to 47. That's the biggest thing in the world. And no economist still, after I've been preaching this for 30 years, understands it, which says they're dead. How dead could you be to miss? I don't care if I have the whole picture. Just to miss something I've been preaching and sold millions of books on, okay? And miss this totally, swing and a miss for economists.
If I want to go more granular, talk about demographics, housing market comes to mind, and the impact of demographics on the housing market. Like, what do you see a correlation, and how is it correlating? What's the impact?
Yeah, I mean, in the family life cycle, peak in spending is 46, moving towards 47 in most developed countries. But real estate peaks first. You buy your first house about age 28, and your trade-up home, your best home, around age 42. So you're buying that before the peak. You go back to Roaring 20s, the Henry Ford generation, the peak in housing was 1925. The peak in the economy was 1929-30. Okay. Well, that was that 42 versus 46, 4 to 5 year difference. So housing is the most important, not only because it's the biggest expenditure, but because it's the most leveraged. That's where we borrow the most money. But it also means when housing goes up and crashes, it's the most deadly. Kai, this is the only and biggest real estate bubble of this magnitude in all of history. Roaring 20s did not even see a real estate bubble of significance. It was only a stock and business bubble. This is the big bubble to unravel because most people now can afford a home, and a lot of people have not only bought their home with leverage, but they've also said, well, I'll buy another house or two for speculation. So a lot of people, and in China, that's the thing, Chinese, more than any society, not only bought their inexpensive family home, the typical China family that has any wealth at all has bought 1 or 2 homes sitting empty in an overbuilt economy with 22% empty homes. Kai, how does that scenario end? China's going to see the biggest bubble burst in all of history, while everybody in the West is worshiping China. Oh, if we could only be like China. You know what China doesn't? They have capitalism, okay? They embrace that. They don't have democracy and accountability of the government. The government has stayed in power by building stuff for nobody expecting sooner or later we'll fill it up. That's how they've kept people from revolting against their absolute power. China government's going to go down. China's going to go down more than any country in history in the next several years. And people are going to say, I thought they were it.
U.S. housing in particular, there are only 15 million houses available inventory, and I saw your Fox Business, I think it was Fox Business or Fox News digital interview, or the snippet of it, and you were talking about illegal immigration and the impact on the housing market as well. Can you repeat what you said there, and like what do you see the impact being here?
Okay, number one, everybody's anti-immigration. Okay, if it weren't for immigrants, and I'll tell you, as a business owner and entrepreneur, if I had a choice between hiring a legal or an illegal immigrant, which one do you think I would choose? The illegal one, because they had to take more risk and try harder to get in. Okay, I mean that may sound horrible, but they're more innovative. Okay, immigration is the only reason we're still growing faster than most of Europe, especially Southern Europe and other parts of the developed world. And Australia makes us look like nothing because they're getting the highest educated, most qualified immigrants from Asia into their country. Okay. So we take immigrants that are less educated than us and turn them into more productive households, which is a big lever. Australia gets people more educated than their average person and then puts them in a better economy with better opportunities and specialization of labor and stuff. So this is immigration is a great thing. Of course, you have to have a strategy around it. You can't take anybody. You can't let anybody run across the border, which we have done more. Australia has the best immigration policy in the world, not because they're smarter, because they were just naturally sitting in a place where Asians, which are the best work ethic people, nobody complains about Asian immigrants. Okay, any other immigrant, somebody will have a complaint. Nobody complains. They have a strong work ethic and they come up and they contribute. Okay, and they start businesses, all these things. Okay, Australia just naturally attracted this, and Australia has the best forecast into 2100, longer than I and anybody listening to this will even think of living, because they're going to continue to attract second world, borderline first world Asian immigrants, high quality, into a first world economy that's almost as rich as the United States and the best parts of Europe. So Australia is the Western country that has the best future for as far as I and anybody listening to this or their kids will live. And you can predict, my point is, you can predict this today. People say you can't predict the future past the next election. No, long-term trends are incredibly predictable. Anything could go wrong. Trump could get shot. Think of all the things that could happen to affect the next year or two into the next election and stuff, and the election and blah, blah, and who went. Next 20, 40, 50 years, piece of cake from my point of view. Asia, especially Southeast Asia and India, are the big winners. And India will be the next China. Absolutely guaranteed, unless they screw it up so far that they're retarded. And I've been to India a lot, and I feel like Indian business people are better than Chinese from the ones I've met. So I do not expect them to mess it up. So this to me is a given. India is the next big thing. China, everybody China to think. No, China's already peaked as a country and will plateau as they get a little more urban, but their demographics are the worst in the world, just second to Japan and South Korea. All of East Asia is going to die in front of our eyes in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And nobody would suspect that. All you got to do is look at demographics, crystal clear.
No, it's an interesting indicator. As you said, like nobody's really paying attention to it. You pick up the odd headline, but you don't see much of it, right?
Yeah.
Harry, I have two more topics. Like I hinted at gold, of course, in the intro, but we need to talk bonds maybe first before we touch on gold.
By the way, I expect gold is peaking here around 3,000. Will go down in the next downturn. The biggest factor driving gold will not be its monetary value in the future. It will be India. India is the next big China, and Indians love gold for investment and consumption. It's a small show of wealth for people that aren't that wealthy and are getting more wealthy. I'm telling you, gold is going to go to at least 5,000 in the next decade or two, and God knows what after that. But gold is probably peaking here around 3,000 near term. So if it goes back down maybe 40, 50, 60%, next boom, it will be the best single commodity in the world because India is going to drive this boom, not China. Indians consume 3 to 4 times as much gold per GDP as the Chinese. And even though China is still number 2 in the world, it drove most of the growth since the 1980s, okay? India is going to do that in the next 40 years, and it's going to catapult gold with it.
Harry, you dismissed gold as a safe haven asset last time we spoke. Is that still the same case? Like gold, like it has been fulfilling its purpose in terms of like protecting yourself against devaluing dollar and other currencies here, especially in the euro area where I'm at. It's been protecting me, but does that thesis still hold? Do you not see it as a safe haven? Because when you talk about the 40-60% correction, I would assume other asset classes will be hurting as well. What's the role then?
Okay. First of all, this is an everything bubble burst. Okay. Everything, all financial assets, real estate, stocks, everything, most commodities. Okay. Gold is doing what it did into 2008. It is continuing to rise in the early stages of a downturn. It will eventually go down only for a short period of time, as it did in late 2008. So it is one of the safe havens. I'm telling people gold is the best safe haven in the early part of the crash, which means now, if I had a choice between buying the treasury bonds, which are the ultimate safe haven in a crash, as they were in late 2008, I would hold or buy gold here. It'll do best in the first, maybe say, year of the crash. And then in the last year or so of the crash, it'll be treasury bonds, because when everything goes bad, gold eventually went down about 40% only in the second half of 2008. So gold and treasury bonds were the two best safe havens. Gold in the first half, treasury bonds in the second half. So now in my newsletter, that's why I'm telling people I'm into gold now more and transitioning into treasury bonds after we see what we have to see, by the way, Kai, is we have to see a first crash that is 40% or so in this year to say we finally topped and we're going into a longer term downturn for the next 2 to 3 years. Once that happens, gold is still the best safe haven, I'd say, into 2025. As we go to 2026 to 27, then the treasury bonds, TLT, average 20-year treasury bonds, 10 and 30, that becomes the best. So those are both. So I would start with gold, maybe 80% gold, 20% TLT, GLD, 20% TLT for the treasury bond. And I would switch to the opposite, 20% gold, 80% TLT into the second half of the downturn. And of course, I'm going to have to gauge that when it happens. I think this is going to take 2 years minimum, 3 years maximum to shake out.
No, fantastic. Harry, very great insights. Really appreciate your time, of course. Where can we send our viewers? Where can we find more of your work, Harry?
Very simple. HarryDent.com. I have a free weekly news. You will get an article with me with a guaranteed chart. I'm a chart person. I don't say something unless I have something to prove it. So I do all my stories and all my books, all my newsletters around chart. So you'll get a weekly newsletter update for free once a week. And then we have a paid newsletter when people feel moved to that. But at HarryDent.com, you can get on the free newsletter for nothing.
Fantastic. Harry, thank you so much for your time. It was great to catch up with you. We'll have to do that again maybe in 6 months' time, see how TLT, GLD, and everything else is playing out.
I think that'll be a good time to catch up.
I think so as well.
Be more clear by then.
Exactly. We'll be through the first 100 days of the presidency and we'll know clearer
Yeah.
what direction we're headed here. Absolutely. Harry, thank you so
We'll
much.
see if he can make America great again. My bet's not. It's not his fault. We're too stretched to make anything great from here.
Catching a falling knife. It's never a thankful job here. So
Exactly.
we'll see where that goes. Thank you so much, Harry. Really appreciate it. Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in to Soar Financially. Tremendously appreciate your time. If you haven't done so, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out tremendously. And I know 80% of you watching are not subscribed. We do thank you for subscribing. Thank you so much. And we'll be back with lots more here on Soar Financially. Thank you so much.